eating salad every day. You're taking your medication every day. You're doing everything right. Why is your blood sugar still not controlled? Why is your blood pressure still climbing? Here's something most people are never told. Some of the healthiest food on the planet, like spinach, grapefruit, turmeric, even green tea, can actually interfere with how your medication works in your body. Today, I'm sitting down with Hayley Buchanan, a registered dietitian who works with patients managing chronic conditions every single day. And she's going to show us exactly what the line is between food that heals and food that quietly undermines your prescription. If you take any medication today, you want to listen to this. Stay with us. Welcome to Where Food Meets Medicine podcast, where we explain how what you eat affects how your medication works and how your health thrives. I'm Dr. Emily Koya, pharmacist, and I believe the most powerful health conversations happen when the people who understand food and the people who understand medication actually sit down together. And that is exactly what we're doing today. I do want to start with a story. I had a patient, let's call her Sarah, diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, and she was determined to turn things around. She started eating clean salads every day, green smoothies, high fiber, everything. She was doing everything right, but her blood sugar was still all over the place. Her metformin was causing stomach upset. She could not explain it, and she couldn't figure out why. The answer? Nobody had ever sat down with her and explained how her new healthy diet was interacting with her medication. Nobody told her that a sudden dramatic increase in fiber can worsen metformin's GI side effects. Nobody told her some of her supplements in her smoothie were affecting her medication's absorption. And that is the gap this show exists to fill. Today's guest fills that gap every single day in her clinical practice. Hayley Buchanan is a registered dietitian and a licensed dietitian who specializes in empowering individuals to manage their blood sugar through practical, sustainable, evidence-based nutrition. She works with a diverse population, and her approach is rooted in one belief: food is one of the most powerful tools for health when you know how to use it. Hayley, welcome to When Food Meets Medicine.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to be on the podcast. Yes, as you mentioned, I'm a registered and a licensed dietitian in the state of Texas. And as a dietitian, I see a lot of patients. Majority of them do have type 2 diabetes, but I also see from pediatric to geriatric patients as well. As a registered dietitian, I first want to start by explaining the difference between a registered dietitian and a nutritionist, because they are not the same thing. A registered dietitian is a credentialed healthcare professional who has to do an undergraduate degree in nutrition. But before that, you have to actually do a dietetic internship, which can be anywhere from 1 to 2 years. And then you're eligible to sit for the exam, which you didn't have to pass. Anyone can say that they are a nutritionist. They don't have to have any experience. They don't have to have any credential, nothing. Any random person can say they are a nutritionist. So first, want to make sure that our viewers understand that there is a difference. So when seeking nutritional information, look for RD or RDN to let you know that that is a credentialed healthcare professional.
That's good to know. So I'll start with the first question to you. Hayley,
Right.
a lot of people do not fully understand, and I think that's what you're trying to explain, at least the difference. But they do not fully understand what a registered dietitian does, especially in managing chronic conditions like diabetes. Could you walk us through your role? What do you do that a doctor or pharmacist cannot?
Yes, absolutely. So as registered dietitian, the structure is mostly around metabolic function and how the things that we consume, whether it's food, vitamins, minerals, nutrients, how our body breaks down, processes, and absorbs those things. Your regular providers, like your PCP and other healthcare providers, don't take these courses and they don't get this knowledge and understanding of how the different metabolic functions affect like food and intake. So that's where your registered dietitian will come in. We are the nutrition experts. And what I go through with my patients versus what a provider will do, they'll tell you, oh, your cholesterol is elevated. They'll tell you, don't consume low-fat dairy, don't drink milk, don't eat cheese. They say, don't do this, don't do that, don't do this. As a dietitian, my role is to say, hey, let's work on better portion control. Let's incorporate more things to help counter. I'm not the food police, as people like to think. I'm not here to tell you the things to take away. I want to work on portion control and adding things to your diet to be for you to stay full, you to enjoy your food, and to be satisfied.
It's a very clear picture. I know the pharmacy part that shows exactly why this collaboration does matter is when, let's say, a patient picks up metformin, I can tell them to take it with food to reduce stomach upset. But I know I cannot sit with them for like 45 minutes and make them understand what their meal actually should look like, what their family cooks, or how their fiber intake is absorbing that absorption. And that's your world. And I know from the medication side, food does not just affect blood sugar, it affects how medications are absorbed, how they're broken down and cleared from the body. And grapefruit is
Yes.
one of the most famous example. It blocks enzyme in the gut, but think of it as a processing gate. Grapefruit jams that gate open, and suddenly certain medications build up to 2, 3, even 5 times their intended level. Statins, blood pressure medications, some immunosuppressants, all affected. So, Ellie, what are the food drug interactions you see most often in your practice?
Yes, definitely. Grapefruit is the biggest one that anytime I see a patient, especially like you mentioned on the blood pressure medications and statins as well, it can increase the potency of the medication. But ones that I also see, we talked about started talking about metformin and fiber, so I'll pick up there. With metformin, the way that fiber works, especially soluble fiber, there's like soluble and insoluble. Soluble fiber is the one that absorbs water and it draws water into the colon. And that one is used to bulk up the stool. And what can happen with medications, if we have a very high fiber diet, then and we're drinking lots of water because water activates the soluble fiber. We have a lot of water, a lot of fiber. Excellent. That is great. It's going to keep you full on the counter with your medications too much, especially close to meal times. The sponge effect, if you will, of the soluble fiber will also suck in the medications that you're taking, and they can therefore decrease the way that the medication is used and processed by the body. So you're not going to get a 100% absorption if you have a really high fiber diet, lots of water, and you're taking it very close to the time of your meals. So I would recommend that for when it comes to fiber, like high fiber foods, or even taking a fiber supplement, like Metamucil, that one's
Yeah.
very popular, to leave a 2 hour gap. So take the fiber 2 hours prior to your meal. And that way your body can already start working on digestion and there'll be less absorption of metformin.
Okay. Well, turmeric and the curcumin supplements. I know people take this because they are anti-inflammatory, they're good for blood sugar, and they really are. But at high doses, they can enhance the blood sugar lowering effects of diabetes medication and push blood sugar too low. Same with cinnamon supplements, berberine, and bitter lemon. I know the message is not to avoid supplements. The message is tell your pharmacist and your dietitian everything you're taking, and we can only help if we have the full picture. So, can
Absolutely.
you share a patient story? Maybe someone whose food choices were quietly working against their medication. What changed when you stepped in?
A lot of my patients do take statins, they do take blood pressure medications, and not all of them, but I have had a handful that one of the handouts, they'll see grapefruit, like, oh, can I eat this? And I look at their medical record and they have a lot of medications that counter interact. So I tell them, hey, let's reduce. Well, first I'll ask them, how much grapefruit are you eating and how often? So if typically people will have it in the morning, and then one patient, she was eating like a whole grapefruit and she was on a statin. And I was like, hey, well, would you be okay with like maybe cutting it that way? We don't have the interactions and we don't make sure your blood pressure doesn't go too low or there's not any issues with the statin.
Yeah. They just didn't have that information, and really, that's not their fault. It's just a gap in the system. So, we're going to talk about something even more overlooked. What medications are quietly taken from the body? So, I want to ask you, Ailey, long-term medication use can deplete essential vitamins and minerals from the body. And I know that most patients are never told this. They're never told that. The metformin and B12, it's probably the best known example. How do you approach this with your patients?
The B12 is commonly depleted with long-term metformin use, anywhere from 3 months up into 3 years. It also depends on like if you're taking a higher dose of metformin, maybe you're taking 1,000 milligrams instead of 500. The higher concentration or the higher dosage and the length definitely play a factor, but they will generally deplete B12. And this is important because B12 as a vitamin on its own, if you have a natural depletion, like you have a deficiency, with or without metformin, you can see neuropathy symptoms, things like pins and needles, numbness, tinglings, usually in the hands and feet. So people who have diabetes, a huge portion of them already have diabetic neuropathy, where the blood vessels in typically the hands and feet are destroyed or damaged because of the chronically high blood sugars. So if you are deficient in vitamin in B12 and you already have diabetic neuropathy, it can, I would imagine, enhance those symptoms. So with those, we want to go ahead and make sure we're eating a vitamin B12 rich diet. And we also could supplement. I usually recommend food first. Of course, as a dietitian, right, we want to stress whole foods. This is going to be things that are rich, that are animal products. So think meat, cheese, eggs, fish, those type of things. And especially if you have cholesterol issues or you don't want to have like a lot of calories, as sometimes these can be calorie dense things, we want to choose the lean options or low fat options. For example, like low fat milk, maybe 1% instead of whole milk. Especially if your cholesterol is elevated, getting rid of some of the fat, the oil, things like that, especially when it comes to the animal products. Surprisingly, that not only is B12 affected by metformin, also magnesium, folate, and then with B12 and folate, there are common interactions with, and vitamin D as well, with calcium. So now there is not only B12, we're having a lot of other vitamins and minerals getting depleted as well. So we definitely want to make sure we're not deficient in our nutrients. Studies did show that, especially older adults, 50 and older, who supplemented with a daily multivitamin, they did see that their serum B12 levels did increase. So a simple one-a-day multivitamin can help. If it's more severe, definitely have a consultation with your provider. And there are B12 shots if you're just very deficient, but mostly we want to start with food first.
You're so correct, because I know that there's so much evidence about metformin and B12. It's quite significant. You mentioned the symptoms, which is fatigue, tingling in the hands and feet, memory problems, which are often mistaken for diabetic neuropathy. So patients suffering from a deficiency their medication is causing, and nobody is connecting the dots. I know that
Mhm.
patients on long-term metformin should definitely have B12 checked annually. It's a simple blood test. And two others, what knowing is diuretic. Water tablets used for blood pressure or heart conditions. They do deplete potassium. You mentioned magnesium. Then protein
Yes.
pump inhibitors like omeprazole, which millions take for acid reflux. They
Mhm.
can deplete magnesium and B12 over time. So, Ellie, before we go into supplements, what dietary strategies do you use first?
Yes. So with the B12, mostly the animal products. If you follow more of a vegetarian or a vegan diet, I would probably talk with the doctor about the B12 injection again if it's like very, very low. And then usually people who are vegetarian or vegan, they usually do take a supplement anyways because they know that they're not going to get high absorption from plant sources because the absorption rate is much lower from plant-based B12. I'm glad you mentioned the diuretics as well because that one is also very common. The ones that are potassium wasting. So as we increase the urination to help keep the fluid off of the body, potassium goes away with that as well since it's a water soluble vitamin. So for those, again, food first. Potassium rich foods, we want to think like potatoes, tomatoes, the colorful vegetables, for example, bell peppers. Those are also going to be very potassium rich, also avocados. And those are the ones we want. If you just have a well rounded diet where we're including all of the food groups, generally we're gonna see very low risk of vitamin and nutrient deficiencies. But kind of like the podcast, if you are having some medications, they can deplete those stores much quicker. So we do want to make sure that we supplement again, food first. I'll probably say it 100 more times before the podcast ends, but food first, and then if we're
Yeah.
really struggling or, long-term use, then we can think about adding a supplement.
So yes, definitely, I do agree that that food first approach is exactly right. Whole foods come with fiber, antioxidants, and cofactors that a supplement alone cannot replicate. So the key message, I think, for our listeners, if you have been on metformin, a diuretic, a PPI, which is a protein pump inhibitor for a long time, a PPI could be omeprazole, could be Nexium, Prilosec. Ask your doctor to check your B12, magnesium, and potassium at your next appointment. It's a really simple blood test and it could explain symptoms you've been living with for years. And if you want to understand exactly what nutrients a specific medications deplete and which food to prioritize, my book, Foods That Clash with Your Prescription, covers this alongside about 85 medication interactions. It's written in plain language for real people. So, Pharma Plan System, you're going to see in the link in the show later on. So, we're going to move on. Haley, here's a scenario I see all the time. A patient gets diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. They are motivated. They go home and overhaul their diet overnight. They cut carbs dramatically. They load up on fiber and then their blood sugar crashes or their metformin side effects gets worse and they cannot figure out why. Walk us through what is actually happening when somebody makes a sudden dietary change while on diabetes medication and how you guide your patients to do this safely.
Yeah, absolutely. So that they're like they have diabetes and people go into crisis. Oh my goodness. They know family members who have had amputations and like severe complications. So they try to get on it as soon as possible. While this could be very motivating and it can be also very overwhelming as well. So we want to make small changes and be consistent with those over time, which is one of the big things that I educate my patients on. For example, like we talked about fiber already quite a bit. We'll probably talk about a lot more and protein. With fiber, as many things and benefits that we get out of it, it can cause GI upset, things like cramps, bloating, gas. And then people are like, well, I just don't need to eat vegetables because they make my stomach hurt. That's not really the best way to execute those things is to try to go overboard. My motto for increasing fiber is low and slow. So we want to start with smaller amounts. If you're not accustomed to eating vegetables, maybe you start with half a cup or 1 cup. And then we gradually can increase the fiber over time. Like we mentioned before, with fiber, it does not function well without water. So as we increase our fiber, we need to increase our water as well, gradually.
Yeah.
Also, the when we eat raw, I would not recommend starting with raw vegetables if you usually don't eat them, again, for the GI discomfort. So I would recommend to have the vegetables and maybe cook them a little bit longer, let them get a little softer. That way we can break down some of that fiber in the plan. So start with smaller amounts, maybe start with half a cup, 1 cup, depending on what's usual for you if you just don't eat vegetables. If you eat vegetables here and there, maybe you can start at 1 to 2 cups. Start with something that is comfortable and reasonable for you to be consistent with. So cook the vegetables, start with a little amount, cook the vegetables a little bit longer, and gradually increase over time.
If you're on a sulfonylurea, glipizide, glyburide, or glimepiride in the US, or glyphosate in the UK, or any form of insulin, and you suddenly switch to a very low carb diet, your blood sugar can drop dangerously low. This medications
Yes.
lower blood sugar regardless of what you eat anyway. So if you dramatically cut carbohydrates, you're removing the glucose that was balancing the medication. And you could go hypoglycemic. You get shaky, you're sweating, you're confused, heart racing, it can come on fast. So the rule is if you're going to make any significant dietary change, tell your doctor or pharmacist before you change your diet, not after. Your medication dose may need adjusting first. So, Ailey, what does a safe dietary transition look like in practice?
Yes, so small changes over time. With the hypoglycemia, that one is very common because people think, oh, I have diabetes. My blood sugars have been uncontrolled for a good amount of time. The doctor starts them on insulin, which they don't want to take in the first place. And they're like, well, I'm just going to cut carbs out. Usually this is like rice, pasta, bread. There are, of course, different types of carbohydrates as well, but these are the key ones that we see all the time. And this is not
Yeah.
recommended. It's to just cut out your carbs, especially if you're on things like insulin and even other types of forms of medication, because the way the body is, the insulin is to help reduce the blood sugar. So those are for people who have chronically high. Well, if you take away the glucose, which is the sugar, and you're still taking medication to lower your blood sugar, for example, insulin, your blood sugar is going to start to dip. And sometimes, especially with insulin, especially fast acting insulin like Humalog, the blood sugar is going to drop very quickly, maybe within 10 to 30 minutes. It's going to go down very fast and you're going to get those symptoms like you mentioned. So we just need to change the amount of carbohydrates we're eating. And then, like you mentioned, to talk to your clinical pharmacist and your providers as well. Because I actually did have a patient. She had a visit with me. She started on a low dose of metformin. She completely overhauled her diet, and she did have some hypoglycemic episodes. She ended up going to the ER, and they're like, "Hey, we need to adjust your medication." So they brought her down from 1,000 milligrams to 500, and she was like very excited. She's like, "Haley, my blood sugar's improved." I'm like, "Yeah, that's great, but we also need to be very careful because we don't want to do things too quickly." And she, like I said, she ended up in the ER. It was great that her blood sugar was much more controlled. Her A1C did
Yeah.
go down, but we want to do it carefully. So we want to make small changes. Again, reducing the portions of carbohydrates, not overdoing the protein or overdoing the fiber, because fiber and protein's job, as we pair them up with carbohydrates, is to stabilize the blood sugar because they slow down digestion. And if your digestion is very slow, for example, with gastroparesis, then you can experience really crazy blood sugar fluctuations, especially common with gastroparesis and type 1 diabetes. And now you're in 400s, and then you have 60s, and it's just up and down. And those can be very dangerous
Mm.
with diabetic ketoacidosis, DKAs, and they people who have, very uncontrolled blood sugars, again, with type 1, because a lot of fluctuations, you can end up in the ER quite a bit. So we definitely don't want to overdo things and make very drastic changes. We want to make small changes, be consistent over time, and definitely if you're able to get a referral to see a dietitian, go ahead and do that. It'll be very helpful. Also, with the diet changes and taking medications to lower your blood sugar, it is very important to monitor your blood sugar. For my patients who just don't want to check, I do try to request them to check at least twice a day or twice a week, depending on how anti needle they are with checking their blood sugars. We always want to check morning fasting on an empty stomach before foods and drinks to see maybe you were having high blood sugars overnight. So we want to check morning fasting. And then anytime after a meal, we want to check 2 hours after eating to make sure our blood sugars are not too high and not too low. So low blood sugar is going to be anything less than 70, and then elevated blood sugar is going to be anything over 180 2 hours after a meal. So check morning fasting and check 2 hours after a meal, whether it's breakfast, lunch, or dinner, just to make sure that our blood sugars are in range throughout the day.
Love that you talk about monitoring and the emphasis on it, because patients often think if I feel fine, everything is fine. But blood sugar can fluctuate. You actually mentioned that your numbers can, go up and down significantly without obvious symptoms, especially in the early weeks of dietary change. So, can you share a story about a patient who made this transition safely and what the outcome looked like?
Yes, so I have a patient. I just saw her pretty recently. She's pretty young, about 24, 25, and she was very scared. Her blood sugar was very, very high. Her A1C, I want to say it was about 15, and she, like most people, kind of freak out. And I said, "Hey, let's make some small changes." She was a big snacker. So I was like, "Hey, I'm not going to strip you of your snacks. We just need to better balance them out." They were usually high carb, like most people, a lot of highly processed snacks, fruit, surprisingly, without combining with something else to balance it. So we adjusted her snacks. We added some low-fat string cheese for some healthy fat and protein. We added some things like beef jerky sticks because she enjoyed those and they are very low carb. So we combined those with the carbs that she already consumes. And then she also started monitoring her carbohydrate intake, and we started better balancing the meals and she almost completely got rid of her sugar sweetened beverages. And over about when she got her new A1C checked, her blood sugar did come down to closer to about 9%. She also increased her physical activity as well, simply just by walking at work, like taking laps around the building, just small things like that. Like she made very small changes that were consistent. She did see her blood sugar come down, even though she wasn't at less than 7. Her blood sugar did change drastically with just very small things, and she was consistent. Not to say you have to be perfect or to do them, you know, every single day you're gonna be 100% on target, but 70-80% of the
Yeah.
time, those are gonna where you see a lot of the changes.
I think for this patient, I would think the first thing is the communication bit. Communicating to you, the healthcare team, especially where she is. I know she may not like where she is, but she's progressed. And I think
Yes,
that's what this show is about. You know, you progress, you move forward, your numbers keep going down, and you can see relatively that you're doing better. So now let's talk about something that is not discussed nearly enough. And I would say maybe cultural foods. So our listeners are incredibly diverse. We have Caribbean, South Asians, West African, Middle Eastern, East Asian, Americans, British, Europeans. And one thing I do hear constantly is the dietitian told me to eat brown rice and broccoli, but that is not what my family eats. That's not my culture. How do you
yeah.
approach dietary guidance for patients from diverse backgrounds who are managing medications and chronic conditions?
Yes. So I think what's important, the first thing is to listen and to understand. So even though I may not be very familiar with the very specific cultures and the things that they eat, I will ask the patient just so I can be aware of. You said, you really don't eat like a Western or American diet. So describe to me like what a typical, we'll do a diet recall, what a typical day would look like for you. And if there are like any foods that unfamiliar with, I will ask like, okay, is this from an animal? Is this a vegetable? And as we're going through our visit, I will look it up on the computer because I want to make sure that we can have a fluid conversation as much as possible so I can understand what will be the best recommendations for them. Most of my patients are actually of a Spanish speaking population, so I've become familiar with some of those things that are a little bit more niche that typical American diet wouldn't consume. For example, like nopals, or some people calling them nopales, which is cactus, like prickly pear. And this is something that's very common in their diet, and it's a non-starchy vegetable, very high in soluble fiber. And they say, "Hey, can I eat this?" And I let them know, like, yes, it is safe for you to have those. We just don't want to overconsume them because, again, with the rich amount of fiber that they have, they can interact with the medications. But just understanding, like, culture to culture, understanding what does that food look like, what are the different food components that go into a meal, and absolutely for sure is understanding the how much they're eating. For example, I've had a few Asian cultures, and they're very heavy on rice, lentils, beans, depending on which specific population. And it can be very difficult and breads as well. Breads I've noticed are very popular amongst a lot of cultures, and they're prepared differently. So understanding like, hey, there's like I can't give up my rice, I can't give up my lentils, my beans, I can't give
Yeah.
up my tortillas. And it's like, okay, I'm not asking you to give them up. We just wanna don't have smaller amounts. Like just work on reducing the portion and better balancing out with non-starchy vegetables, high in fiber. Let's add some lean protein just to add some more balance. Because again, I'm not the food police. I'm not here to strip anybody away of their food or their culture. We just want to make sure that you can incorporate the things you love and still manage your chronic conditions.
I think what you just said is so important. And I do want to make this concrete because naming specific food matters. It tells people your kitchen is part of this conversation. So, for our West African listeners, bitter leaf, moringa, fenugreek, bitter lemon, melon are widely used in cooking and traditional medicine, and they all have documented blood sugar lowering effects. So, if you
Hmm.
eat those regularly alongside metformin or sulfonylurea, you may be getting a compounded effect. That is not a reason to stop eating them. It's a reason to tell your healthcare team. I know for our Caribbean and South Asian listeners, Scotch bonnet peppers, tamarind, garela, bitter gourd, soursop, leaf tea are also used medicinally. Beautiful tools with real medicinal properties. And these properties matter when you're on medication. For our American listeners, we mentioned grapefruit juice at breakfast, licorice candy, herbal teas, and high dose vitamin supplements from health food stores are three of the most silent interactions I see. Grapefruit juice affects statins and blood pressure medication. Licorice root can raise blood pressure. Vitamin E supplements can enhance blood thinning and warfarin. British and European listeners, tonic water contains quinine, which can interact with certain medications like St. John's wort, herbal tea. That's widely sold in UK health shops. So one of the most important or the dangerous supplement interactions in pharmacy affecting antidepressants, blood thinners, and contraceptives. So I'll say full English breakfast with black pudding is high in vitamin K, which is relevant in warfarin. For Middle Eastern and Mediterranean listeners, pomegranate juice can affect how certain medications are metabolized. So similar to grapefruit, olive oil, garlic at therapeutic doses can enhance blood thinning effects. So the thread across all of this is not restriction. It is awareness and communication. A meal plan you would not follow because it does not reflect who you are is not a good meal plan. Full stop. So, Ellie, what does success look like when cultural food is actually honored in the plan?
Success looks like our blood sugar is well managed, we're enjoying the food, we're full. A lot of my patients, they just eat less to the point where they're hungry. And it's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. I don't want you to go to bed hungry. Let's have a evening snack that's well balanced. So success looks like we're incorporating things that we enjoy. We get satisfaction from our food, especially because with a lot of cultures, eating as a family is important. And there's a lot of community around food. So we want to be able to enjoy our food. It tastes delicious, adding your herbs and spices and things that you enjoy, but also managing your chronic conditions to the point where, yes, we can still have a piece of cake, we can still have something sweet.
Yeah,
We just
yeah.
don't want to have that to be the majority of our diet.
Yeah, you want sustainability. You want it does require a cultural relevance. So if you want a meal plan built around medications around your cuisine, it could be Nigerian, it could be Caribbean, it could be South Asian, Mediterranean, American, or British. The MediMeal plan at farmerplansystem.com does exactly that. Real food, your food, designed around what you actually take. So the link is going to be in the show notes. So Ailey, we're now at the moment where we ask rapid fire questions. I'm going to ask you a few questions. You're going to answer real quick. No
Okay.
overthinking. You ready?
Yes.
Okay. So, number one, the biggest medication myth you've heard in the context of diet and chronic disease.
That because I take a cholesterol lowering medication, and or my cholesterol is controlled, I don't have to take it anymore. That is a myth. I learned, well, usually with cholesterol medications, if you abruptly stop taking them, you can have some adverse side effects, especially with your cholesterol actually skyrocketing. So, that is one of the biggest myths I heard. Make sure to talk to your doctors
Okay.
and your pharmacist before you discontinue any medication suddenly.
Second question. One piece of advice for every patient starting metformin for the first time.
Starting my program for the first time. Don't try to overhaul your diet. Talk to a registered dietitian before you start making drastic diet changes. And monitor your blood sugar for sure. Please monitor your blood sugar.
Okay. Most surprising food drug interactions you've ever seen in your career.
Probably fiber. I didn't know that fiber could have such a huge, huge, huge impact on so many medications. So just making sure we're not over consuming them and everything in moderation.
Simple hack for metformin related nausea.
Yes, to you can try ginger products like ginger, sugar-free ginger candy, also like ginger tea. Some people, if you're brave, they will do ginger root. It's very spicy, but that can help settle the stomach. Make sure you take your metformin on consistently around the same time every day and on a full stomach. If you're having issues with diarrhea, slowly increasing your fiber intake can help with that as well.
Okay. Good. Sweet or savory snack when your blood sugar drops too low?
Sweet, absolutely, for sure, because we need some glucose, we need some sugars to get
Yeah.
the blood sugar up. Savory things tend to be more like higher in fat or higher in protein, and those things will not raise your blood sugar. It'll actually keep your blood sugar from going up. So absolutely sweet.
Okay. One food you wish more people understand the power of.
So this one is actually a food group of beans and legumes. They're very high in fiber, they're high in protein, they are a carbohydrate, so we don't want to overconsume them, but they have a lot of vitamins, minerals. So this one is more like a complete food, if you will. And if you do have it with like rice and beans, for example, it is a complete protein, giving you all of your essential amino acids. So beans and legumes.
Okay. So I'm going to have you complete this sentence. The safest thing you can do for your medication is.
Take it consistently.
I totally agree with that. Take your medication and be consistent. Before we go, if there's one message you want someone managing a chronic condition and taking medication to carry from this conversation, what would it be?
Don't give up, especially for those of you who have a high pill burden or medication burden. Try to be as consistent as possible because we don't want to have any drastic changes that could affect your health. It is very difficult, especially we've talked about diabetes a lot. Diabetes distress is very real. And if we're too high, we can have issues. If we're too low, we can have issues. So try to be as consistent as possible and seek community, family, friends, social groups. That way they can help to keep you accountable, uplifted, and motivated. You got it. You can do it.
Wow, this is the perfect note to end on. And I like that. Seek help, have support. Here's what I want everybody to take from today. Your plate and your prescriptions are not separate conversations. They've always been on the same conversation. We just have not been having it loudly enough. Food can heal, food can interfere, food can deplete, and food, when understood properly alongside with your medication, can become one of the most powerful tools in your health journey. You do not have to choose between your food, the food you love, and the health you deserve. You just need the right information, and now you have a little more of it. Hayley, thank you so much. You've given our listeners something that they can use at their very next meal. Where can people find you?
Yes. So we'd have a website. You can find me on firsttimenutrition.com, and it's time, THYME, like the herb. Also, you can follow on Instagram at First Time Nutrition as well. THYME. Yes.
So before we go, if today opened your eyes to how food and medication interact, I have 3 tools that can help. My MediMeal Save app, it checks any food against your medications in real time. 200 medications, 250 foods, 16 cuisines. My book, Foods That Clash with Your Prescription, goes deeper across 85 medications in plain language. And the MediMeal plan, it builds a personalized eating plan around what you actually take. Everything is at pharmaplansystem.com. All the links will be in the show notes. To everyone listening in the US, the UK, Nigeria, India, the Caribbeans, everywhere else this show reaches, thank you for being here. Thank you for paying attention to your health in this way. If this episode helped you, share with someone who takes medication every day, because that's most of us. Most of us were never told any of this. So subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube so you never miss an episode when food meets medicine. Until next time, eat smart, your meds matter, and your body will love you for it. Take care, everyone.